Deputies involved with this incident were placed on administrative leave pending final investigative findings. Due to recent developments, including findings during our internal investigation, those deputies that were still employed by this department have all been terminated. We cannot, however, confirm or deny any specific facts related to this incident because of active and ongoing investigations.
6 police officers in Mississippi have finally been fired after torturing 2 black men in January. This happened in January and they were just fired. Now, the officers entered the home of Michael Corey Jenkins and Eddie Parker without a warrant, responding to reports of simply drug activity. They spent the next 90 minutes raping, tasing, and waterboarding the men. This ordeal finally ended when one officer put his gun in Jenkins' mouth and pulled the trigger. Shockingly, Jenkins survived. At a press conference for the 2 victims, one of their mothers very reasonably became visibly emotional.
They act as if my son was not even human. This is how they treated my son. After shooting him on his knees, put a bullet in his mouth.
And the trigger was pulled, intending to kill him. And it's only by God's grace that he stands here today because the bullet escaped on the right side of his neck.
Now, we're gonna go through the details of what these men were forced to endure. I think we just need to hold in mind that the biggest question is, how are these monsters in uniform not in prison for their sadistic hate crimes? They were fired. They're not in jail. They haven't been charged with anything, just fired. That's it. So now let's go through what happened from AP News. Jenkins and his friend Eddie Terrell Parker said on the night of January 24th, 6 white Rankin County deputies suddenly came into the home where Parker was living and proceeded to handcuff and beat them. They said the deputies shocked them repeatedly with stun guns over roughly 90 minutes, and at one point forced them to lie on their backs as the deputies poured milk over their faces. Both Jenkins and Parker also informed agents with the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation that deputies stripped the 2 naked, forced them to take a shower together, and attempted to use a sex toy on them during an hours-long interrogation. Now, it says in that story, in that article, attempted to use a sex toy on them. What it should say is the officers raped them, because that is what happened. Daily Mail also reported on the story that Jenkins, who has trouble speaking because of his injuries, said that he was on his knees at the end of the ordeal when one of the deputies stood over him. The deputy placed the barrel of a gun in Jenkins' mouth. It fired and the bullet exited behind one of Jenkins' ears. Now, Jenkins, as I said earlier, survived, but his tongue was severed and his jaw was broken. We have a picture here of Parker and Jenkins, the 2 victims of this grotesque police brutality. And I'm sure at this point, you can believe it, because this is so often how these horrible stories go. The end of this, the victims were charged with crimes, not the officers, not the perpetrators, the victims. From AP News, Jenkins was charged with possessing between 2 and 10 grams of methamphetamine and aggravated assault on a police officer. Parker was charged with 2 misdemeanors, possession of paraphernalia and disorderly conduct. Now, there were 6 officers involved in the torture. They've either all been allowed to resign, or in some of their cases, they've been fired. None of them have been charged with the crime. The victims were charged with crimes. Not a single one of these officers has been charged with the crime. And we don't even know half of their names. WLBT3 reported that 3 deputies are named: Hunter Elward, Brett McAlpin, and Christian Dedman. 3 others are listed as John Does, 1 through 3. So not only did they get to, with impunity, brutalize, rape, abuse these men, then they get to do it anonymously. 3 of them at the very least, and not a single one of them is facing any actual legal repercussions. And it shouldn't surprise any of us that the officers who we know of have all been involved in several cases of brutality against black men in the past. And apparently putting guns in people's mouths isn't uncommon for these police officers. Another black man, Carvis Johnson, alleged in a federal lawsuit filed in 2020 that a Rankin County deputy placed a gun into his mouth during a 2019 drug bust. Johnson was not shot, thankfully not shot. But in another case involving Deputy Hunter Elward, a Black man died under mysterious circumstances, and his family is still searching for answers to this tragedy. Mississippi Public Broadcast reported that on July 26, 2021, Damian Cameron was at his family's Rankin County home when Deputy Hunter Elward arrived, responding to a call of vandalism at a neighbor's house. What happened next remains disputed, except for the fact that the 29-year-old was pronounced dead at the University of Mississippi Medical Center shortly after with trauma to his face and arms. His family said they witnessed officers chasing, then dragging him through the woods. He unfortunately died of his injuries in the hospital. And I'm warning, we're going to show this picture, but it is graphic. There you can see him on the left before, and then on the right after he was brutalized by the police and eventually died from his injuries. Jackson, this is a story that just felt like it just wasn't going to end. Just all of the instances of police brutality in this relatively small town in Mississippi, and the fact that these officers, even still with this massive amount of coverage of what's happened, are not being held accountable for any of the, I mean, they've murdered people. These are murderers and they're not being held accountable.
Yeah, I mean, and this is definitely like an example of as bad as it could get. For people to be able to do that, obviously, you gradually build up to levels of tolerance with anything. So for them to be this comfortable, clearly they were doing that on the job. And to God knows how many other people, which also begs to the question, how did people like this get on the force at all? And unfortunately, with the reality of municipalities being different, so many of these issues just really can't be solved at a federal level. There has to be collective action at the local level. Also, this happening in the state of Mississippi is very fitting, just kind of not just for the state of Mississippi, but just what's going on in a lot of states like that. The aggressive, we gotta pass a 6-week abortion ban. We just have to, you know what I'm saying? It's just really a reflection of what this country has been and what it still is. But, like I said before, these police officers absolutely were very comfortable doing this. They're very dangerous individuals who clearly have an itch that they can't fully scratch. So they're going to keep on doing this to people because they can't stop themselves. Because, I mean, again, if you're just comfortable, this is what you do.
Exactly. And just because these individual officers resigned, that there's obviously a culture of allowing this within that police department, and honestly within most police departments. So we'll keep an eye out on Rankin County and cover, hopefully eventually justice coming out of there, and keep demanding it